I'm excited about this show, and I'm going to tell you why. I have this guilty pleasure, and it is something I don't like to admit in front of everyone, but I love watching a little reality TV. Not reality TV of today that's mostly scripted, but the reality TV that showed us the raw, unfiltered mess before the big reveal. Things like home renovation shows where they rip out walls and they find unexpected disasters like a bunch of kittens in the wall or mold. Those weight loss journeys where people hit setbacks before their transformation. The moments where you realize, oh my gosh, this is what real change looks like. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's full of struggle before the success comes. That's exactly what leadership transformation is, and exactly what this show is going to be about. But here's the thing. When we hear about transformation, we usually hear the Instagram version, the pretty version. We usually hear about it after the fact when everything looks tied up with a bow. We hear the polished success stories told with the benefit of hindsight. It's not the full picture. It's not the full truth. Because real change is messy, uncomfortable, and it really doesn't look pretty in the moment. So this show is about pulling back the curtain on the reality of leadership transformation before it's shiny and clean. When I worked as a change leader at a global consumer goods organization, I made the mistake of thinking everything had to look good on the outset. I nearly drove myself into exhaustion trying to make the change look perfect from the outside. I thought if everything looked seamless, people would trust the change. I wanted every communication, every process, every milestone to be flawless. But then a really wise VP sat me down and said something that changed everything. She said, none of this has been perfect. None of it has to be perfect. If it looks perfect at this stage, then something's not right. Real change gets messy before it gets better. She told me that, and I've realized it ever since. It hit me hard. Change isn't about making things look good. It's about making them work better. And that means digging into the layers, uncovering root causes, addressing the tough, uncomfortable truths, excavating human emotion. And on top of all of that, you have to do it with and through other people, which means resistance, complexity, emotions. Here's the kicker. What makes real transformation possible? And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Bringing leaders who have been through it, they've been through the trenches, the ones who didn't just ride the wave of change, but actually built the surfboards themselves. Sometimes, after wiping out a few times, they'll share failures, missteps, and the brutal lessons they learned that propelled them further, faster. Because real leadership isn't looking like you have it all figured out. It's about having the courage to get up there and keep going, even when you don't. So if you're here for the sugar-coated stories, the Instagram-worthy end results, this isn't your show. But if you want to hear from leaders who have been there, who aren't afraid to show the ugly truth behind their biggest wins and some of their failures, then welcome. Because the best transformations don't start with perfection. They start with honesty, grit, and a willingness to embrace the mess. So let's get into it.
I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. The Excella Group launching our brand new podcast, Transformation Unfiltered. This has been in the works for a while, and it's something we're incredibly passionate about. Why? Because it brings us even closer to the heart of what we do, partnering with leaders who are navigating real change in their organizations. This podcast is all about pulling back the curtain and having honest conversations with human resource leaders and executives who are deep in the trenches of transformation. These are the people making tough calls, leading through uncertainty and figuring out how to move their people and their companies forward in meaningful ways. And let's be honest, it's not always smooth sailing. That's exactly why we wanted to create a space where they can share not just their wins, but also the lessons learned along the way. Our goal with Transformation Unfiltered is to deliver authentic, practical insights that anyone leading change can relate to and learn from. Whether it's tackling leadership challenges, building cultures of trust, or figuring out how to execute complex transformations, we're getting into all of it. And what makes this even better is that we get to deepen our connection with industry leaders by learning from them, elevating their stories, and growing together as a community. So if you're curious about the how behind successful change as we are, or just love hearing real talk from leaders who have been there, this podcast is for you. I can't wait for you to join us on this journey.
You know, when we were thinking about the concept for Transformation Unfiltered, one thing that really stood out to me was the unfiltered part. So often we're in programs, we read articles on best practices, and all of those things tell us what we should be doing in transformation, right? What are those skills, the processes, the things that we're supposed to follow along the way? But what they don't do is tell us about the challenges that we can expect or how to navigate them. There might be a little bit about impacts and risks, but that's where the filters come in. So this podcast is really all about taking the filters off and hearing from leaders about the challenges that they've experienced that ultimately became catalyst. That's what this podcast is really all about. Real conversations, hearing from leaders that aren't afraid to share those missteps, those challenges, those obstacles that they had, and really the ones that became catalysts for growth and reshaped how we lead and drive change. I think of it like looking up a new recipe. I always find myself scrolling right to the comments to read about mistakes that others either made or challenges that they uncovered. People will put in there little adaptations they made that, in their opinion, make it even a little bit better than the original recipe. And that's what we're going to do in this podcast. We are going to take off the filters and hear from leaders so that we can learn from each other and not have to go through it alone.